We're going to continue in our 1 Samuel series. If you haven't been with us, this is week 26, I think. We're 26 weeks in. How many weeks is a pregnancy? Like 40 weeks or whatever? 30 something? Yeah, so anyway, we're almost there, right? We're in the third trimester of this series, and we're getting closer. And our intent is to try to finish this and then do a small Christmas series toward December. So we're kind of pushing through, doing a lot more text than we have been doing. We're doing whole chapters and things now. Today we're going to be in chapter 25, so if you want to turn there with me, feel free. Of course, the text will be up on the screen as well. Today's title is Beauty and the Beast. How many of you saw that movie? And how many of you saw the remake of that movie a few years ago? Yeah, I saw that in the Chula Vista Drive-In, right? There's not a lot of drive-ins anymore, but there is one over there. And we saw that movie over there, and we're singing along in the car because no one could hear us, so it was cool. But you'll see why we're calling today's message Beauty and the Beast. We're going to be introduced to some new characters. And so far, if you're not in tune with where we've been, of course you can watch and catch up. That's 25 messages you got to catch up on. So let me just give you the Cliff's Notes of it. Saul has become king, and he's going crazy. He's all over the map. He started out pretty good, and very quickly he turned pretty bad, and he's done some pretty horrible things. A few weeks ago, we saw kind of the height of his insanity, murdering a bunch of priests, hundreds of people, based on just a lie, basically, that he was believing. And you're going to see him continue to do some pretty radical, crazy, gnarly things. But thankfully today, he's not in our narrative. He's not our antagonist today. We've continued in our series to see kind of how not to live through the example of Saul and how to live through the example of David. And some of that, a little bit of that role is going to be reversed today with David. He's going to get kind of caught up in something. And there's a new person that's going to enter the scenario and really kind of be our example today. And so I want for us to be able to kind of look at those things. We're going to see some new examples of how to live and how not to live. And so we're going to jump right into it. It's a sad first verse to share. Because there's a death here, and it says, 1 Samuel chapter 25, verse 1 says, now Samuel died. Remember, he was the prophet. He was the man leading the nation for so many years. He was Saul and both David and Saul's mentor. And it says that he died, and all Israel gathered for his funeral, and they buried him at his house in Ramah. And then David moved down to the wilderness of Maon. Remember, Samuel was very special to both Saul and David. He was a leader. He was a mentor. He was someone that had come alongside them in very pivotal times in their life. And so if you were here last week, you were introduced through Pastor Bob to a truce between Saul and David. Do you remember? Last week, if you weren't here, Saul has been for chapter after chapter after chapter trying to kill David. He's chasing him all over the desert. And David's not trying to kill Saul, but Saul thinks he is. It's this big, huge drama. It's a soap opera. Well, David and his men are hiding in a cave, and Saul goes into that cave to do some business, some paperwork, we'll say, or whatever you want to call it. So he's doing his thing. Think of Numbers, not one, but the other one. And he's there doing his thing, and David has the opportunity to just slit his throat and be done with it all. And he doesn't. And he just cuts the corner of his robe. And then after Saul's done doing his thing, and he walks out, and David says, listen, I could have killed you, man. And I didn't, because I don't have beef with you. And so Saul says, all right, it's over. I'm no longer mad. Come here, my son. And they kind of make amends, at least temporarily. And we see that these amends, you can imagine that these amends are still in place. The truce is still in place for the funeral of Samuel. So things are okay right now between Saul and David. And David has been a man of integrity, and he's not done what he could have done, and he's done all of the right things. And today we're going to see a little bit of a change in him. So verse 1 is a sad verse. Verse 2 continues, there was a wealthy man from Maon who owned property near the town of Carmel. And he had 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats. That's a lot, okay? This guy's rich. And it was sheep shearing time. And this man's name was Nabal. Say that with me. Nabal, okay? And his wife, Abigail, say that with me, Abigail. Is Abby here? We got Abby's dad, but not, she's probably in the other. We have an Abigail here, I know that. We're going to stand up. Look at what she was. She was sensible and beautiful woman, okay? She's an important character today. But Nabal, a descendant of Caleb, was crude and mean in all his dealings. Verse 4. And when David heard that Nabal was shearing his sheep, he sent 10 of his young men to Carmel with this message for Nabal. Hey, he says, peace and prosperity to you, your family, and everything you own. I'm told that it's sheep shearing time. And while your shepherds stayed among us near Carmel, we never harmed them, and nothing was ever stolen from them. So they were protecting them. Verse 8, ask your own men, and they'll tell you this is true. So he asked the question, so would you be kind to us since we've come at the time of celebration? This would have been a very normal thing. If someone comes during a celebration, you feed them, okay? They're like, we're here during the right time. Can we get some meat, right? Would you be kind to us since we've come at the time of celebration? Please share with us any provisions you might have on hand with us and with your friend David. David's young men gave this message to Nabal in David's name, and they waited for a reply. Now, how many of you think Nabal's going to be, oh yeah, come on, son. Come on in. No, you're wrong. Here we go. Verse 10. It says that he was mean in all of his dealings, right? Continuing, verse 10. Who is this fellow David? Nabal sneered. So you're already right there. You already get his attitude. Nabal sneered to the young men. Who does this son of Jesse think he is? There are lots of servants these days who run away from their masters. Should I take bread and my water and my meat that I've slaughtered from my shearers and give it to the band of outlaws who come from who knows where? So he's like, nope, I'm not giving you any meat. I'm not giving you any food. Verse 12. So David's young men returned and told him what Nabal had said. And here's what David says. Get your swords. Get your swords, was David's reply, and he strapped on his own. Then 400 men started off with David, and 200 men remained behind to guard their equipment. So we know right now that David has about 600 men in his company, okay? Remember, these were kind of the outlaws. These were kind of the guys that, the guerrilla fighters. These were not the traditionally, known guys that are going to fight battles, but they're good at what they do. And David takes 400 of them. And he says, let's go to the grocery store. Let's go to Nabal's grocery market, right? With our swords, because we're going to get some food. That's what he's saying to them. And David sends these men for help, for protecting. What they had done is they were protecting Nabal's men, his livelihood, his place. This was sounds very similar. If you remember 2 weeks ago, David inquired of the Lord. He saw that the Philistines were attacking a city named Keilah, right? And David says to ask God, should we go and protect them? And God says, yes, go and protect them, right? And he saves them. He saves the whole city. And then what are they going to do to him? They're going to turn him over to Saul. They betrayed him. This sounds eerily similar. And so there's been betrayal upon betrayal upon betrayal on David's account. And he's upset. And we see today the title is Beauty and the Beast, and Nabal is, of course, the beast, right? He shrugs off David's men, and David's upset. Look at what it says there. Get your swords. David's like, grab your swords. We're going to the grocery. We're going to go get what we deserve. It's interesting to me, though, that as much of grace and mercy and, David never did anything wrong against Saul, who was trying to murder him time and time and time again, right? And we continually see David show mercy towards Saul. He could have killed Saul. He had every right to kill Saul. Saul was trying to kill him. He had every right to take over the throne. He'd been anointed king. And continually, David is being gracious and merciful towards Saul, who's literally throwing spears at him. And he doesn't try to kill him ever. And then Nabal doesn't give him a sandwich, and he's like, let's go kill him. Right? It's so weird. Right? It's so interesting. David's complete 180 attitude in dealing with people who have hurt him. Right? he does a major switch. And he's so gracious and merciful to Saul, and now he's ready to start lobbing off heads. It's crazy to me, the change in his attitude. Nabal refuses some food, and David's ready to kill. It's almost like, have you heard of that, what is it? It's an idiomatic expression, the straw that broke the camel's back. Do you know that? You know what that means? Like the camel or the donkey or whatever has such a huge load of burden on it, and it's just that one last thing, right, that broke down. Have you ever seen that experiment where you put rubber bands around watermelon? Have you ever seen that one? Keep a rubber band upon rubber band upon rubber band. You put one rubber band on a watermelon, it's not going to blow up, right? You put like 300 of them on, it's that last one that, right? It's almost as if this betrayal for David was like the last straw, right? It was like the last straw. And many of you have been there, right? You've been, maybe you're married and your husband, you know, he's really upset you or whatever, and it's just been boiling up and boiling up and boiling up, and he leaves the toilet seat up, right, that day. And you're like, ah, right? You are tripping out. And he's like, it's just the toilet seat. And you're like, but you don't know. And you're freaking out, right? Because it's way more than just the toilet seat, isn't it? Yeah, we've all been there. We've all been there. We've all been to that point in our life where we just couldn't take it anymore, and it was a small thing. Not that this was like a really small thing, but compared to what he's been dealing with, Nabal didn't give him a sub sandwich, you know what I mean? And he's like, I'm going to kill him. We've all been there. I had a similar kind of incident last week, 2 weeks ago now, after my mother-in-law had passed. And I was getting the church van washed at Soft Cloth Car Wash. And the stupid van, and my friend's here, Marcia's here, because I went off. Okay, I went off. The church van has automatic windshield wipers, okay? You can't turn them off. There's no, like, if you can tell me I turn these off, I would appreciate it. And so as soon as water hits the windshield, they start going, right? And you're in a car wash where things are flying, and every time it rips the windshield wipers right off. And so you pay $5 to get your car washed, and then you spend another $30 on windshield wipers. So that stupid $5 car wash ends up costing you about $35. And I had it, right? It was like my mother-in-law died. We'd been dealing with all of the chaos of it all and watching her, and I had just dropped off my family. We were at my father-in-law's house to eat dinner, and the whole family was there. And I'm in the car, and Lori Cousins, I just dropped him off because there's so many cars at his house, and I'm down the block. And she's like, where are you? And I was just bawling in the car. Like it had all, right? It had all come out at that point. It wasn't about the wipers, was it? No, it was about my mother-in-law. And those stupid wipers were the straw, weren't they? And I'm still mad about them, right? And some of you are like, idiot, get over it, right? But it wasn't the wipers. It was the situation that I was dealing with. And we all have those things, right? We all have, and David is having one of those moments right now. Betrayal upon betrayal upon betrayal. And Nabal is going to pay, right? Sometimes it's your kids that pay. Sometimes it's that coworker that parks in your spot that pays, right? Sometimes it's your spouse or your mom. It seems like the people that are closest to us are the ones that pay a lot of times in our life. This, it was someone that wasn't close to him at all. It was a stranger, and sometimes strangers pay, right? They just do. And so that's what we find ourselves in the middle of. Thankfully, though, David gets intercepted before he starts lobbing off heads. Let's look at it. Verse 14, continuing. It says this. It says, meanwhile, one of Nabal's servants went to Abigail and told her, Abigail says, Nabal's wife, remember, David sent messengers from the wilderness to greet our master. But he screamed insults at him. So this was more than, no, you can't have any food. This is intense. He screamed insults at them. These men have been very good to us, and we never suffered any harm from them. Nothing was stolen from us the whole time they were with us. In fact, day and night they were, In fact, day and night they were like a wall of protection to us and the sheep. You need to know this and figure out what to do, for there's going to be trouble for our master and his whole family. He's so ill-tempered that no one can even talk to him. Thankfully, there was someone on the inside, right? There was someone on the inside that knew the situation and acted. And a lot of times we need that person, don't we? We all need that friend that's going to come alongside us, who's sometimes an insider, right, that knows like the reality of a situation and can come alongside us and can help us through a difficult time, can warn us, right? Can warn us of the things that we don't see. Because a lot of times in our life, we need an insider perspective or an outsider perspective to help us see what's really going on. Abigail had no idea that her husband was dealing this way, and she was about to die. All of them were about to die. And sometimes we need those people to come alongside and say, hey, watch out now, right? We need to be that, and we also need to welcome that in our life. We need to welcome those Abigails in our life. So Abigail's the beauty. She intercedes, and she prevents, you're going to see, mass murder. Verse 18 continues, Abigail wasted no time. She quickly gathered 200 loaves of bread, 2 wineskins full of wine, 5 sheep that had been slaughtered, nearly a bushel of roasted grain, 100 clusters of raisins, and 200 fig cakes. So she's loading them up, right? She's like, we're going to bless these guys. She packed them on donkeys and said to her servants, go on ahead. I'll follow you shortly. But she didn't tell her husband Nabal what she was doing. She was smart. We're going to find that out. Verse 20. As she was riding her donkey into a mountain ravine, she saw David and his men coming toward her. And David had just been saying, look at David's attitude. This is what he's just saying. A lot of good it did to help those men, help this fellow. We protected his flocks in the wilderness, and nothing he owned was lost or stolen. But he has repaid me evil for good. And now he begins here to sound a lot like Saul. Look what it says. May God strike me and kill me if even one man of his household is still alive tomorrow morning. Our example of how to live and how to deal with people, David, there's a turn here. There's a major difference in his attitude now than it has been in the past. Okay? There's major. He's been ripped off. He's been betrayed. It's like this is the last thing. It sounds a lot like Saul. He's definitely not listening to the Holy Spirit like he does so many times before. See what happens. Verse 23, when Abigail saw David, she quickly got off her donkey and bowed low before him. She fell at his feet and said, I accept all blame in this matter, my lord. Please listen to what I have to say. I know Nabal is wicked and ill-tempered man. Please don't pay any attention to him. How many of you wives have said that before? Please don't pay. I had a perfect example yesterday at our yard sale where my wife said, please don't pay attention to him. And you know what I'm talking about. I'll tell you later. If you really want to know, I'll tell you later. I'm not going to tell the whole crew because it's a little crude. He is a fool, just as his name suggests, but I never even saw the young men you sent. So she's laying it out there. She's laying out her case. Verse 26. Now, my Lord, as surely as the Lord lives and you preserve your life, and you yourself live, since the Lord has kept you from murdering and taking vengeance into your own hands, let all your enemies and those who try to harm you be as cursed as Nabal is. And here is a present that I, your servant, have brought to you and your young men. Please forgive me if I've offended you in any way. The Lord will surely reward you with a lasting dynasty, for you are fighting the Lord's battles, and you've not done wrong throughout your entire life. Even when you were chased by those who seek to kill you, your life is safe in the care of your Lord your God, secure in his treasure pouch. But the lives of your enemies will disappear like stones shot from a sling. She's good at what she does here. It's a good politician. Verse 30. When the Lord has done all he's promised and has made you leader of Israel, don't let this be a blemish on your record. Then your conscience won't have to bear the staggering burden of needless bloodshed and vengeance. And when the Lord has done these great things for you, please remember me, your servant. Old girl's good, right? She's good. That's what she does. Let's continue. 32. David replies to Abigail, praise the Lord God of Israel who has sent you to me today. Thank God for your good sense. Bless you for keeping me from murder and from carrying out vengeance with my own hands. For I swear by the Lord, God of Israel, who has kept me from hurting you, that if you had not hurried out to meet me, not one of Nabal's men would still be alive tomorrow morning. Then David accepted her present and told her, return home in peace. I've heard what you said. We will not kill your husband. Abigail, this chick is legit, right? She's legit. She's got beauty and brains. And if you look at that account, you find that she's very savvy at how she appeals to David, how she goes about this request, this thing that she does, this conversation that she has with him. She appeals to him on multiple levels. First of all, she takes the blame. And remember, in his mind, he's all about, there's this idiot, Nabal, and like in his mind, he sees this doofus, and he's like, he's imagining cutting his head off and all this. And then all of a sudden, there's what? A beautiful woman there, right? And she's taking, it's pretty hard, right? To hold some hottie, right? Responsible, who's taking it's like a hard to be able to do that. So she's appealing to his what? To his eyes, right? She's appealing to his eyes. She also brings gifts of what? Food and wine and fish. She's appealing to his what? His belly. Quickest way to my heart, right? She appeals to his belly. They've been out in the desert for who knows how long. They're hungry. So she appeals to his eyes. She appeals to his stomach. She then appeals to maybe his ego. She says she knows him, right? She begins to talk about how she knows that and believes in him, that he is the next anointed king. She's talking about Goliath and slings and stones. She's building up his ego. She's like, I know who you are, and you're going to continue to be. And so she's like, she's using what she has there. She's very smart at what she does. She believes that he's going to lead the nation, talking about his dynasty and things like that. So she appeals to his eyes and to his stomach and to his ego. And then lastly, she starts pouring on that guilt, doesn't she? She starts pouring on that guilt. She appeals to his conscience. It says, don't do this. Don't let this be a blemish on your record, on your long-lasting dynasty that's going to be there. Don't let this curse come upon you. Murdering, vengeance, this girl, she's beauty, brains. She could run for president here and win for sure, right? She could be our next president. She's smart. She knows what she's doing, a great negotiator. And look at what David says. Return home in peace. I've heard what you said. We will not kill your husband. She's got it all figured out. Look at as it continues. We're almost done. Verse 36. So Abigail goes home. When Abigail arrived at home, she found that Nabal was throwing a big party and was celebrating like a king. He was very drunk. So she didn't tell him anything about her meeting with David until dawn the next day, which I think is a mistake. But anyway, it's not up to me. I think you just tell him when he's drunk, and then he would forget about it, and it wouldn't be no big deal, right? She waits till the morning when he's hungover, which doesn't make any sense to me. But anyway, in the morning when Nabal it says he was sober, but we all know if you're drunk, the next morning you're hungover. His wife told him what had happened. And as a result, he what? He had a stroke. And he lay paralyzed in his bed like a stone. About 10 days later, the Lord struck him, and he died. Moral of the story, if someone asks you for food, you give them food, right? Right? If somebody asks you for food, you better give them some food. Nabal is gone. God took care of David's enemy. David didn't have to. Remember, God's leading David. He's leading David. He's leading David. And David nearly slips up here. Has this huge temptation and is almost ready to fall into who knows what could have been a very long slide of sin. But he doesn't, thankfully, because God takes care of him. He sends this woman to him. Let's close this out. Verse 39. When David of course, right? When David heard that Nabal was dead, he said, "Praise the Lord," right? He's dead, which is kind of weird to say. "Praise the Lord, who has avenged the insult I've received from Nabal and has kept me from doing it myself. Nabal has received the punishment for his sin." Then David sent messengers to Abigail to ask her to become his what? Wife. Wow. Man. Okay. Verse 40. When the messengers arrived at Carmel, they told Abigail, "David has sent us to take you back to marry him." What do you think she's going to say? Yes or no? How many of you say yes? How many of you say no? Yeah, okay, here we go. We'll find out. She bowed low to the ground and responded, "I, your servant, would be happy to marry David. I'd even be willing to become a slave, washing the feet of his servants." And quickly getting ready, which I doubt that's really true. Quickly getting ready. I'm just saying, she's going, this is ridiculous. I want to know what it says in the original language. Quickly getting ready. It's all relative, I guess. Quickly getting ready, she took along 5 of her servant girls as attendants, mounted her donkey, and went with David's messengers, and so she became his wife. Last 2 verses. David also married Ahinoam from Jezreel, making both of them his wives. Saul, meanwhile, here's the only mention of Saul in this chapter. Saul, meanwhile, had given his daughter Michal, David's wife, to a man from Galem named Palti, son of Laish. So Saul had given Michal, remember the whole David and Michal, older sister, all this stuff, crazy stuff, and David goes and kills 200 Philistines, and for the price for his daughter, we talked about the bride price and all that, and she betrays dad, and it's just literally a soap opera. And here we find out, if you continue through, you read to 2 Samuel chapter 3, you find out that David eventually gets Michal back and then marries 5 other people, 5 other women. 8 wives. I'd struggle with 1. I don't know how you do 8. I really don't. It's 1 is enough. But we know that he marries 8. So I'm going to ask you the same question. That's the end. I'm going to ask you the same question that I always ask you, right? But I'm not going to write them down on the board today. What stood out to you in this chapter? I have something that I want to talk about in the remaining time, which I got to figure out how much time I have. But in this chapter, what stood out to you? I love when we're able to learn from each other what God's talking to us individually about. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, let me review. David, even though the anointed king, he didn't seek out God in that point. And when we don't seek out God daily, we can trip. But God sends an interceder, an intercessor, an Abigail, right? And she helps bring him back to reality of who he needs to be. That's good. What else? What else stood out to you? Yeah. Go ahead, babe. God killed somebody? That's interesting, right? Did you read that? That it says that he had a stroke and died 10 days later. Why? Why did he? Because he didn't feed somebody? That's interesting, right? Man, we better feed people that ask us for food, right? We better. What else? What else stood out to you? Yeah, I can't see that. Oh, great. Yeah. Yeah. God's grace is big, right? Because David's about to do something could totally ruin, right? And we know that David does some things later on that are maybe not as bad, but pretty bad. God's grace is always there, and God intervenes at that point. Go ahead, Bill. Come on now, preach. Yeah, David repented when he was confronted with his sin. Absolutely. Yeah, perfect. I saw Terry. Yeah, Terry. Yes. Yes. Sure. Right. Right. Absolutely. Right. Yeah, so she's talking about, like, this is Old Testament. David had this temptation, right? And he very well could have just did what he wanted to do. But we have New Testament, 1 Corinthians 10:13. For no temptation has seized you except what is common to man. But God is faithful. He will provide a way out for you so that way you can stand up under it. Right? That God's going to provide a way out when we are tempted. He's not going to let us be tempted beyond what we can bear. He's going to provide a way out. And God did in this instance, right? He provided Abigail. And David could have said, you know what? Forget it. We have that same exact, every day we have that same choice. Whenever we're tempted for sin, there's going to be an option for us to choose. We can choose to or choose not to. Absolutely. Who else? Yeah, Michelle. Yeah, Abigail took it upon herself to save everybody. Absolutely. Perfect. Strong, capable, smart, beautiful woman. Love it. Love it. Yeah. Absolutely. We are called to be the Abigail, right? Absolutely. Yeah, I like that. Man in his disobedience can be blessed by a godly woman. Absolutely. Absolutely. No doubt about it. And the opposite way, right? And certainly today in this case, it was the woman that brought reality to the situation, right? And it brought kind of sanctification, salvation to it. Yeah. What else? Anyone else? Well, I've got some. What I want to talk about is a lot like what what we're already talking about, and this is in your sermon notes. If you have some sermon notes, these are the fill in the blank things there. And it's just basically one point, and then I want to kind of expand on that point. And it has to go. It's really kind of a lot like what we were talking about, and it's this idea that we can't live today on yesterday's obedience. You can't live today on yesterday's obedience. We have to daily obey. We can't just rely on what God's been doing in our life and our ability to resist temptation and our whatever. We have to live today like it's a brand new day. We can't just rely on our obedience from yesterday or the day before, the day before. It is a daily thing for us. Do any of you know the name Chuck Swindoll? You know that name? If you listen to Greg on KCFY, you'll hear him. I believe you still play Chuck on Live Today. Anyway, sorry, I don't know. But anyway, he wrote a book called David. It's about David. I'm going to read for you a quote that kind of falls right into line with this. It says this. It says, yesterday's victories may become today's temptations. Think about that for a second. Yesterday's victories may become today's temptations. The sin we shunned yesterday, we may embrace today. Sunday's unconditional love can turn into Monday's selfishness. How many of us have dealt with that? Right? We have a great day Sunday, we're all about Jesus, and then we wake up Monday morning and right, you're a completely different animal. A tender, forgiving heart can become punitive and tough. And a refusal to retaliate can turn to cold-blooded revenge, which was really the case of David here. You cannot live today on yesterday's obedience. We need to wake up every morning, every single morning, and commit to live out God's plan for us that day. We need to do what we need to do. And yes, I know as we grow in our faith, as we grow as Christians, that a lot of those temptations are going to become easier to resist. But you cannot rely on that. Okay? You can't just say, those are no longer an issue for me. We have to be diligent as believers in Christ to wake up every morning praying on the armor of God for protection. Pushing those things aside that were once temptations to us, because trust me, and I just talked to Lori about it, those temptations that were far away from your life for years can easily come right back to you in a snap of a finger in one day. We need to be aware. David here, he's been a great example for us. He's about to slide into this sin. Okay? And we can too, so easily, if we're not diligent to live today on today's obedience, not yesterday's obedience. So how do we live today? And we're going to do a little acronym, LIVE. How do we live? That's in your sermon notes. How do we live today? When it comes to temptation, how do we live today? The L is we need to learn from our past mistakes. We need to learn from those things. We're all going to make mistakes. The reality of it. We're all going to make mistakes. The goal is learning from them, right? Learning from them. If we don't learn from our mistakes, then the pain and the consequence that we deal with those mistakes is going to be wasted, right? And how many of you, like me, had the wooden spoon in your house, right? How many of you had that, right? And some of you learned pretty quick. Boom, that hit your butt, and you're like, ouch, right? I don't want to do that anymore because I learned from the wooden spoon. I know some of you younger kids are like, what's a wooden spoon, right? That's how we used to do things. That's old school, or a switch or whatever. And yes, I used to, when we were camping, I'd get my own switch. Like, you learned from your booty, right? That, ooh, that hurt. I don't want to cuss out my mom anymore, or whatever that thing was that you did. You learned from your mistakes, right? Some of you had to get hit a bunch of times, right, before you learn. And some of you have a stronger booty, or you put on like 10 layers of jeans or whatever, and so you're not really learning like we should. Some of you, though, saw your brother or sister get the wooden spoon, and you're like, oh, I don't want any of that either. So it's additionally important from us to learn from whose mistakes? Others' mistakes, right? Not just learn from our own mistakes, but learn from others' mistakes. And I can tell you in my own life, and plenty of examples that have been in front of me, that I have learned how not to be based on mistakes that have been made in the people around me's life, okay? I've learned, how to be a better parent based on lots of bad parenting that I've seen. And so I want for us to always learn from the good and the bad examples, right? The good and the bad examples. And that's what we do. We want, as parents, we want our kids to learn from our bad mistakes, don't we? We don't want them to experience the same pain that we did. And so we have to learn from our mistakes. And we want our kids to learn from our mistakes and for them to learn from others' mistakes. The I is this: invest in guardrails. You need to invest in guardrails. Now, on a road, say I'm on the road here, you can see there's a, whatever it is, 18-inch drop, right? When you're on the side of a road, normally the guardrail is where? It's right there on the edge, right? Preventing you from what? Flying down the hill. Any of you ever drive up the mountain to Prescott the back way, right? Up that windy one, or up a mountainside, and it's some of you are like, oh, some of you don't like it, and others of you are like hanging out the car, you love it. Those guardrails are there to what? Prevent you from falling over the side. Here's what I want to challenge you with. I want to challenge you to yes, there are those guardrails there, but I want you to invest in some guardrails that are way over here, okay? That the guardrail is here. Yes, there's a guardrail there. The edge of the mountain is there. But what I want you to do is place a guardrail right here, way far away from the sin, way far away. And when I am tempted in my life, and we're talking about temptation, and we're all tempted in different ways, aren't we? Absolutely. Some of you are going to go, I'm not even going to get into it because you're all crazy and you're like me. We all are tempted in different ways. But when I set up a fake guardrail or a real guardrail here, like an imaginary guardrail, it's not real, like I'm not pounding in nails and things like that. When I have a temptation, in my life that I know I don't want to go there, I'm going to put a guardrail here. For instance, let's say relationally, I don't know, relationally, a boyfriend and girlfriend, they know that they don't want to have sex before marriage, right? That's the thing they're trying to prevent. So many boyfriends and girlfriends are going to what? They're walking right here, right? Right here along the edge. And all it takes, and they're coming as close to sex as they can, right? And we're going to kind of rename it sex, and it's not really, and this and blah, 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 all these different things, right? And they're walking so close to the edge, so any little wind, what? Pushes them over, right? When your guardrail is here, when you say, we know that we don't want to have sex before marriage, so we're not ever going to be in a car alone together, right? That's your guardrail. Is there a sin? Is it a sin to be in a car alone with someone? Absolutely not. But when you put that preliminary guardrail in place, and you say, I'm just not going, like I don't drive alone with women in my truck. I just don't, okay? There may be the off time when it happens, but predominantly, I don't. And that's just so that way if any of you around town see some random blonde chick in my car, right, you're not questioning, right? Because I know me, but I don't know that person. What if that person, so for me, the guardrail is here, right? I'm just not even going to get in a car. Is it a sin to? No. But what happens when I break that barrier? Sometimes you may have to. What? I'm still what? I'm still safe. And so those guardrails in our life, let's say like you don't, it's not like you have a drinking problem, right? Should you go to the bar and hang out with your buddies that drink, right? And do all of that? No, right? Is there a sin in just going to a bar? No. Is it a problem for you drinking? Yeah, if you have a problem, that means you probably ought not to go to the bar, right? So that way, you don't, if you were to fall over, hey, I'm way far away from that sin. We need to invest in guardrails in our life that are way on the safe side of the mountain. Way on the safe side of the mountain. So for some of you, that means you got to get rid of your computer. For some of you, that means you have to end the relationship. For some of you, that means, like me, I cannot go into the kitchen after 9 o'clock at night, right? I can't. Do you know what I mean? Is it a sin? Absolutely not. Is it a sin for me to gorge myself on all of those chocolate chips that are frozen in the freezer? Come on, yeah, like I don't need to be doing that, right? So I don't even go in, right? Do you guys understand what I'm talking about? I hope that you do. Oh man, we're close to, let's go. Here we need to voice our concern. V is voice our concern. You need to have one or two people that you can tell, that you can talk to in your life about your temptations. And you can say, hey, I have a problem. Yesterday, my two best friends, Jason and Marcia and I, we went riding dirt bikes, and we were just riding around some construction sites and stuff just around town, and we ended up talking. We stopped in the middle of a construction site on a dirt road and talked for like 45 minutes. It was more about talking and holding each other accountable because one of us had an issue, and we needed to share it with each other. It was more about just talking. You need those people in your life that you can say, hey, I'm struggling with this. Will you pray with me? Will you help hold me accountable to that? It's interesting. It's interesting how when we let the secret out of the bag to somebody, that temptation begins to lose any kind of control that it has over us. I shared with Lori a few weeks ago something that had come back up in my life. And I'd been kind of hiding it from her and not really, I'm trying to figure it out on my own. And you know, it was tough. The minute I told her about it, you know what? No longer an issue for me anymore. Because I brought it to light. I brought the reality of the situation to light. And now I have someone there that can help me with that. We need to voice our concern. And then last, we need to expect attacks. Okay? Attacks are coming. If you're a believer in Jesus, that means Satan wants to do what he can to keep you in the gutter, right? He wants to do whatever he can to try to keep you away from what God has for you. And Satan knows when you're weak. Some of you are weakest on Monday morning at 6:30, right? And you're like, I'm not going to work. I hate it. Some of you are weakest on Friday at 5 p.m. It's 5 o'clock somewhere, right? Like, that's when you're weakest. Satan knows when you're weak. Know that those attacks are coming. Be prepared for those things. Identify those temptations and expect those attacks. And ready yourself with these tools that we've talked about. Have those friends in place that can pray for you. Worship team, you guys can come forward. When should I try to live? When should I try to do these things? And it says today, right? Which is always, tonight, often, daily, and always, and yearly, okay? When should I try to live out God's plan for me? Today. Those are your fill in the blanks there. Tonight, often, daily, always, and yearly. We cannot live today on yesterday's obedience. Don't be like David and just keep running the things the same way they've always been and not just kind of no-braining it. You guys know what a no-brainer is? It's a no-brainer. Don't be a no-brainer in your spirituality. I've dealt with that years and years and years ago. It's not going to be a problem anymore. It can quickly creep up and become a very serious problem for you. David was a constant example of how to live. And thankfully, today, we have Abigail that was there when he was about to slip up. We all need those Abigails. Let's commit to live today the life that God has for us. Let's pray, and then we're going to continue